Hello, everybody. Whoa. Hello, everybody. There we are. Sorry, it took a second for the audio to kick in. Let me know if you can't hear or see me okay. YouTube servers have been having some hiccups lately. So some streams, they'll start to stutter or drop out or the audio cuts out. If that happens, and everything's cool on this end, if that happens to you, log out, leave and come back in, and usually that fixes it. So it's happened a lot to certain channels. So far, it hasn't happened to me, but if it happens, that's how to fix it. Always, I try to answer these in the question that they're asked. In this case, at the very beginning of the chat, they get a little jumbled up. So I'll start with Jorge's question here. Any pros to replacing the stock rectifier tube? I have a 59 Bassman reissue with a 5U4. Do I need to modify the amp? The Bassman, there are two versions of the Bassman reissue. One which had a solid state plug-in, in which case you can put in a 5U4 or a GZ34, which is also called a 5AR4, and then you just need to rebias because your B plus will be lowered. If you have the GZ34 and you go to a 5U4 GB, you will also need to rebias, as the B plus will be lower still by about 30 volts, but there's no modification of the amp. You just need to have the bias set. Evening, everyone. Aloha, where it is appropriate. Victor. Martin Patterson's having a problem installing 4 EVM10Ms in his 65 Super Reverb. The top left speaker is hitting the power and output transformer as a choke. What are your options? Your options are to use a different speaker. The EV is a huge, huge thing, and there's not a lot of space there, as you've discovered. The only option is to choose a more appropriate speaker for that situation. The EV is a cool sound. It is not the only cool sound, and you can also mix and match. You could have two EVs down on bottom and two smaller speakers up top that blend well together, and which one the audience hears is which one you put the microphone on if you're playing in a professional situation. I would not choose that speaker for that amp, but if you like it, you can use it in the bottom two, or you can use 3 of them, but you can't put one where you're trying to put one there. Sorry. Let's see. Daniel Mincher just started a repair service in Kent, UK to help out a few local people and wondered if the Orange valve tester is worth the investment. It's a lot of money to fork out. As Brad has already said, I would not waste money on the Orange. If you need to get one, get a Maxi Matcher. I don't have one myself. I do actually have 2 old valve testers. They're up in the attic. I need to restore them at some point because it would be a cool thing to do. I just haven't had the time. In general, if I have a question about a tube working or not, I power it up on a current limiter. If I get new tubes, I buy from Tube Depot. They've got all that stuff. And if I have, say, SVT come in with 6 6550s, I will take all 6 of them to Tube Depot and have them test them and make sure none of them are duds. And if one of them needs to be changed out, they can sell me a new one that matches the rest, which saves my clients a lot of money. So I've been very fortunate to live 20 minutes away from them, who are very, very good at testing tubes/valves. For anyone else, if you're by yourself, you probably would need to get a tube tester, in which case save up and get the Maxi Matcher. It is the way to go. Or, have some cheap working amps around that, you can pop a 34 or 6V6 or 6V6 in, just make sure it's not a dead short. Use a current limiter, make sure it's not going to kill the amp, but if something were to go wrong, maybe an old HRD or something, just to use as a test bed. Hey, Matt Johnson. I don't recall. I don't think it would have been Hefeweizen. I don't usually order Hefeweizens. I don't care for them. They tend to be a little bit sweet. But I don't recall what it was. It was a wonderful local beer. And I'll also answer Captain Fineweather here. The same point. He said, the size of the glass looks very much like what we call a Mass in Germany. Or is that Masse or just Mass? You haven't been here recently, have you? No, about 2 years ago, in 3 weeks, it would be 2 years ago, we were in Vienna, in Austria. And I saw these questions before I started the show, so I've got a few things ready for you here. Let's see here. Which button? And which screen do I want to share? There's a way to do this. Here we go. So 2 years ago, plus 2 or 3 weeks, on the day that picture was taken, we were at the Upper Belvedere and seeing such things as this. That's not a dorm room poster. That's the original. And it was just a phenomenal day. My wife and I are both big fans of art. When we travel, we choose destinations based on the art museums. And we were just having, the censors, the YouTube will block me for that one. A little bitty peepees. This is the view from the steps of the Upper Belvedere as we were leaving. And you can see Vienna. And it was just a beautiful day in March. They're not quite in order. Oh, there's that guy. More blockage. I better get out of this before we get to the Egon Schieles, and I totally get demonetized. Oh my gosh, people had genitals back in the day. Anyway, we after leaving the Belvedere, we found this little restaurant. I don't recall what it's called, something in the garden, in the Belvedere Gardens. And that is my beer to scale. And that's Nikki's beer to scale. I repeat. And there was a dish that I'd wanted to try when I was planning the trip, and all the videos I saw were in German, and they all called it Schweinsachse. And I could not find that anywhere in Vienna, but then I found it was called Stetzel in Vienna, and it is a ham hock. So the ham hock and the mustard and the bread and the fresh kraut, and it was with horseradish, and it was fantastic, especially with the beer. Nikki had some kind of goulash with dumplings. Austro-Hungarian Empire, a lot of goulash there. And the Stetzel went down a treat. I did eat the pepper kind of as my dessert. And from there, slightly wobbly on my feet, we walked to Karlskirch and the rest of the day. And I'll spare you the rest of the trip now, but it was just a fantastic trip. And I was really kind of mournfully missing, because I realized, about 2 years ago we were in Vienna and Paris, and now I'm here, and I got to go to the grocery store later, and got to get some gas for the car and all that fun stuff. And thank you, Goody Guitars, appreciate that. And let's get back to people's questions. But yeah, Vienna waits for you. Ooh. We had that song in our head a lot. We also had the Ultravox, of course, which meant nothing to me, and then again, we listened to a lot of classical music on that trip because it was apropos. We were in Paris a couple of days before that. We were walking through Montmartre, and up the little street that goes up the hill to Sacré-Cœur. Right before we get to Maison Rose, there's a little sign on a doorway up some steps, and that's where Erik Satie lived. And Nikki was not familiar with his music, so we played a lot of Gymnopédie at that point, and then a lot of Mozart and Beethoven. Christopher Quine, letting everyone know they swapped out the original knobs on the 68 reissue Vibrochamp with some Oxblood Davies 1470s, and all is right in the world. If only it took about $15 worth of plastic knobs to fix all that is wrong in my world, I'm very, very jealous, but I'm glad you found a happy place. Speaking of Schweinsachse, hey, Anus McMuffin. Sentences you never thought that you would find yourself saying. Let's see, what 6V6 power tubes do I recommend in a deluxe reverb issue? This week, from a good vendor, I've had the best luck with Electro-Harmonixes. I would steer you away from TADs. They have had serious QC issues, and they just don't seem to be up to the task. And the JJ6V6S and the new ones with the double micas are really prone to microphonics in a combo. Yeah, you'll be fine with a cranked AC30 into a 100-watt attenuator load box. I'd still want to have a good, high-quality attenuator load box, and you don't need to crank the AC30 S1 or any AC30 or most amps to really get the sound, and don't do it for like 3 hours in a row. Remember that the average concert is 90 minutes. And it's only the people like AC/DC that really have those things going full tilt these days. And they can afford to, they have warehouses full of amps and crates full of tubes, and they've already made a bunch of money. So how do you afford your rock and roll lifestyle becomes an issue. You got to find the balance. Hey, Daniel Crescenzo. Any idea of why his bandmate's 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue pops when powered down? Also got some noise issues. We've got fresh tubes in the mail. Previous owner put F&Ts in the doghouse. Could be a slightly iffy solder joint. Could be a tube that's not happy. Noise issues. I bet the new glass will probably take care of it, but make sure all the hardware is tight. I've got videos on what owners can do for their Fender reissue amps, and they're in the Fender reissues playlist. And a big part of that is opening it up and making sure everything's tight, because a lot of those connections, pot to chassis, etc., jack to chassis, etc., also involve grounds. And so if any of those are even slightly loose, you can get weird pops and issues. Am I working on more combos than heads now, and are the days of 100-watt heads numbered? I imagine the days of 100-watt heads are numbered, mostly because of stage volume issues. Almost everyone who does what I do always works on more combos than heads, because more players choose combos than heads, because you can put a 1x12 or 2x12 combo in the back of your car, whereas you get a head and a 4x12, that's larger than most cars can easily transport. It's more than most stage volumes allow, and most of us don't have roadies. And good to see you, Martin. Hope you're drinking something better than coffee. I have no direct experience with Synergy amps and the modules but I know the guys who are doing those things. And they are quite clever people who do good work. And I expect if they're putting their name on it, it's fantastic. But I've not tried one in person. Hey, StratFan STL. Ideas for a video. An overview of my schemes for organizing my parts inventory, parts from work in progress, and test tool paraphernalia to maintain productivity and sanity. Well, I'd love to be able to make that video, but my organization is like a seesaw. I'll get everything organized, and 3 months later, it's kind of jumbled and reorganized and gets jumbled. I need an office manager. I have certain things like my big, right back there, you can see on the wall, drawers of resistors, and I've got various drawers there with stuff in it, and I've got, let's see, clear bins. This one's got various wires, which I need to go through and spend an hour sorting out and labeling. So I've got stuff that's really well organized. Like, if I want a 22K half-watt carbon film resistor, I just go to that drawer. It's got like 200 plus of them. Same for diodes and things like that. And other stuff, as I'm working, it's faster for me to just stuff in here on the idea that someday I'll get back to it and organize it. But I know where the wire is. It's at least in this box that I can see. So I'm not the guy to go to for organization. Hey, AJ Magnus. What are those little blue caps I use for replacements in a tremolo oscillator circuit? Thank you. You're very welcome. Those are, hey, Jeff Mackerlane. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for joining us, Guy. I didn't mean to pluralize you, Jeff. Those are Muratas. They are multi-layer ceramics, the dip ceramics from Mauser, and they're about $2 or $3 each. They are rated for 1 kilovolt. They're not going to drift with temperature. They're not going to change with humidity. They're not ever going to fail in that circuit. And so if you want it to be 22 nanofarad, 10 nanofarad, 10 nanofarad, it'll be that 100 years later. They are really small and don't look at all vintage correct. But I think if Leo Fender had had them available when he was designing that circuit, he'd have used them because they're so damn good for that purpose. I do not use an LCR meter. I've got one. It's rarely useful, and I don't test caps in circuit. You can very rarely test a capacitor in circuit because everything's in parallel in series with it, and everything has capacitance, so it throws off the reading unless you're just reading the capacitor by itself. And I have an LCR meter, and it's just never useful. Hey, Joe, could I explain unity gain in a pedal setup and how it's achieved? Well, unity gain is the signal that comes in is exactly the signal coming out of a pedal or a series of pedals is exactly the same level as the signal going in. Now, the trouble with that is that it depends on what the pedals are. Like an overdrive pedal, by its very nature, has compression. And so there are two ways that we hear level. There's the peak, and there's the average. I'm going to dumb this down so we don't spend 30 minutes on this. And so if I'm playing a clean guitar and it's peak to peak, well, the average is maybe here. With an overdriven tone, the peak to peak may be the same, but the average may be here. So as far as a peak goes, it's going to sound, it's going to measure the same. As far as what we hear is louder, it's going to sound louder. So it gets complicated. You often don't want an overdriven sound to be unity gain. You want that slight increase. But if you want to chase it, you can't just say, what is the peak here? Because peak to peak is going to be the same. You want to see what the average loudness is coming out. And that's more than most players ever, players don't tend to get out of scope for that, or their techs on big tours don't do that. You turn it until, hey, that's about the same level, on or off. If you want it to be the same level, you just go by ear. And if you're slightly off, don't worry about it. But basically, you want to have the sound. What you don't want to have happen is you turn off all your pedals, and all of a sudden your guitar is really puny and quiet. You want everything to be healthy, even without this stuff. Unless you're doing some real specific, maybe shoegaze thing where you just live with that compressor and you want to have a level increase through all this stuff. Give me a rule. I'll find a way to creatively break it. That's the entire goal of art, is to say, these are the boundaries. We're going to push as hard as we can. But it's important to know why those boundaries exist, so you're not just blindly lashing out at boundaries. Hey, Kenichi, sorry if you asked before. Don't apologize if you asked before. Would I have any insight into which model AC30 is the Vox's number? Is the Edge's number one? His tech says it's a 64 and a 70s cab, while others believe it's a 69 VSL. Well, Dallas has spent more time with that amp than the guys typing about it have. And I know some guys who've worked on that, and I've not asked them what's in there. As far as I know, it is a 64 or 65 AC30 with a 68 or 69 cabinet due to the logo size. But I also know that amp has had so much work on it over the years, including stuff that was available when they needed a road fix, that it does not sound exactly like any other 64 or 68 AC30. I know some aspects of it that are, I know some of the stuff in there. I know some of the stuff in Eddie's amp. It's the player at that point. The amp is certainly a help, certainly not a hindrance, but it's not the secret. Any experience with blue caps labeled MF630.1K? Yeah, they're fine. I don't recall the make, but almost anything can be reliable for a vintage Fender amp if it's 630 volts. Correct. That gets into the subjective. The only consideration I have is that in a Fender amp layout, the traditional layout, it's designed for axial caps, and you don't want to make radials fit because it stresses the connection where the radial lead leaves the radial body. And I can describe how I get perfectly round chassis solder joints. Mine come out like pudding. I'm using the Weller Big Iron. It's tough. I take a very small tempered steel flathead screwdriver, and I make a crosshatch, fairly deep crosshatch in the steel of the chassis. So there's a rough surface for the solder to adhere to, just get down in there. And then I clean the heck out of that with isopropyl. And once that is dry, I tinned the iron, and then applied that tinned iron to that area of the chassis until that area of the chassis gets really freaking hot. And once the chassis is hot, I turn the chisel tip up on its end so the pointy end of one of the chisels is touching the amp, so I have very little contact. And then I begin to flow solder into that. So I'm heating, the entire area is very hot, but one point is hotter than the rest, and that's where I know want that solder to adhere to. And then once I can feed it solder until I have the bead where I want it to be, maybe about a quarter inch in diameter, then I'm good. And it sticks there, and I don't have any issues, and it just takes practice beyond that. Mikhail Ur says, I heard when Korg looked at Edge's amp, they didn't find anything remarkable or odd, no mods, etc. It's the players in their ears. It's not anything dramatic, but it'd be like they had some road work done in 1984, and the guy didn't have 0.15 coupling cap, so he used a 0.1. It's little things, and I know that the amp has been brought back from near death a few times, because it is, back when he had real amps and sounded good, it got a lot of use. Hey, Jeff Harper, just curious, based on the discussion of a working man's guitar last week, what about those like yourself who consider Fender Players 2 Stratocaster a high-end guitar versus a $2,600 one? It's not a matter of more money makes a better player or any snobbery. It's just that it's a lot more rare. It's a lot more rare and difficult to find a really good, inexpensive guitar. There are also a lot of very bad, expensive guitars out there. Fender Custom Shop. So you don't have to spend $2,600 and up to get a guitar that makes you happy. But I think one of the factors that we're running into these days is inflation is going up more than income. So the guitars that used to cost $350, $400 now cost about $1,500 and up on the used market, but people aren't making the same, have not made as money as much as the values of things go up. So every year people want more and more guitar for about $400, and what you can get for $400 every year goes down with rare instances. So I think if you find, say, a Squier Classic Vibe Strat for $400, and it plays okay, it doesn't have any major issues, major fret sprout, no major buzz or anything, that's great. If you can get the sound you love with that, that's fantastic. But odds are, even if it's good at first, the frets are going to sprout. The nut is going to be cut too high. It's never going to play in tune the first 5 frets, unless you then have a tech do $100 to $300 worth of work on it. At which point it will be pretty much approaching what you would get with a Fender Players series, which may only need to have the nut slot lowered because guitar factories rarely get the nut slot right. So you get the cheap guitar, you put money into it, you end up where you would have been if you gotten the next price up to begin with. You can end up chasing your tail. And at some point, you can get a guitar like this that doesn't need any tweaks, doesn't need any changes. It's just very, very good. And, in 1988 or 89, I bought a Fender 62 reissue Strat for $1,200. That's what they cost then. Now they're about $2,400. You cannot get anything that quality for $1,200 these days. So everything's gone up by everything is about twice as much for the same. This is not much more than that. It's about $3,000. So 40 years ago it was a $1,000 to $1,500 guitar. Everything keeps going up so much. It is no shame in buying and playing what you can afford. I've had lots of good guitars that are very inexpensive, but there's no shame in saying, no, I wanted something really nice. And if you do this professionally, you have every justification to spend up to crazy amounts of money on things. I don't think I need to spend crazy money on too many things, but I've got relatively crazy money in that, and I've got relatively crazy money in the 64 reissue 335 I have. But I'm 54, and from a certain point of view, I'm a professional guitarist. So, or at least they come here and they play for you guys using those guitars into the amps I work on. So, if I had to say, all right, if you really have a budget to get a rig, I would say the consistently best choice would be like a PRS DGT SE for like $800 used, maybe less. And there's some other SEs used that you can get for like $600 that are also good, but consistently the DGT. Get that in a Boss Katana 50, and you'd be looking at about $1,000 rig, and then later you can upgrade the amp. There are exceptions to the gotta pay more to get more rule. Hey, Magisterium. Has it ever been tried to use two valves or two halves of a valve in an arrangement similar to a Darlington transistor? Could it work for a high gain stage? There are things like Cascodes, which do similar things. You can do Cascodes, you can do current follower situations. Pretty much anything that you can do with a transistor, you can do with a triode, and vice versa. Whether the results will be what you want is up to a lot of other factors, including it's just subjective. But look at current followers, and look at Cascode gain stages if you want to look into more of that stuff. You can do a cascoded 12. This is not Cascade, Cascode 12AX7 that behaves more like a non-microphonic EF86. I have a strange microphonic sound, Joe says, when he strums the A string on his Telecaster on both his Ignator Tweaker 15 and Super Champ X2. Does not hear the sound on his AC30C2. Any insights? It could be something in the room vibrating on that A or overtone of that A, and it's just a matter that those two amps are closer, or it could be the resonance of those and weight of those cabs. It could be where they are in the room. It depends on where the sound is coming from. It is very common for me to be playing in here, and certain notes, I'll have an amp that's sitting on the shelf over there start to ring out, and I don't worry about it because I know what the cause and effect is, and that's not a problem. But you can have mysterious things happen acoustically in a space, and not just acoustically, but in terms of the mechanics of things vibrating, surfaces vibrating. So I would suggest, if they're on the hardwood floor, put a towel under them. Do you still have the vibration? Or put them up on a chair. Do you still have the vibration? Or is the vibration coming from the amp? That's the part of the puzzle I don't have. Is there a better way than small rubber washers to add more resistance friction to loose turning pots? JDS asks. Yeah, well, I would not use rubber washers. I would use felt. If you really want to reduce the friction a little bit. You can also often, let's see if I can, let me grab a pot. All right, we get prepped for this demonstration. Let's see if you can see that. All right, imagine there's a pick guard there underneath that nut, and then the knob is on top of that. Well, if there's a space between the knob and the washer, a tiny space, that knob's not going to have any added resistance. What you can do is either with an additional tooth washer or additional finish washers, is you can set the pot deeper in the pick guard so that the nut sits higher, and oftentimes you can adjust it so that the knob plastic is then riding right on that nut, and that'll give you more friction, and that's a free way pretty much to increase the tension on a pot when you want it to be there on a knob. Did my butt crack show to you guys? God damn it. Sorry. I won't do that to you again. Hack up my drawers. God damn it. I have to go back and find one of those ways to edit and blur out my butt. Sorry. God damn it. I didn't even feel a breeze. I need to put a little fan in here. Fine. See if I show you my pots anymore. Goddamn. Let's see. Hey, Michael. If you put back the original baffle in a 60-year-old 64 blackface deluxe reverb, replacing the birch ply he used for years, will you hear a difference? The old Grillcloth is cooler. If it's structurally good, if the baffle, the old baffle, the MDF isn't all dissolved where the screws go in, and it's holding holding the speaker fine. Gosh, everyone's talking about my ass. Okay, come on, guys, let it go. You've seen worse things on the internet today, I guarantee you, or you will if you watch the news. It'll sound different. Whether it's better or worse is subjective. My only concern would be if the old baffle, especially if it's been sitting by itself, has warped, doesn't make a good contact with the four screw points, or the chipboard has absorbed moisture and can't hold the screws anymore. So, you got to watch out for that stuff. Let's see. Best replacement 12-inch Alnico speaker for vintage tone and a Tweed Deluxe. Getting old and your back doesn't like ceramic speakers. Well, Alnicos don't weigh much less than a ceramic, but I would say the Weber 12A 125 would make you very, very happy. Though I will also say that I've been very impressed with the Mojotone Alnicos I've tried lately. Though I've not tried their 12. Their 10s really sound fantastic. Is Hoffman the only source for glass epoxy boards for AB763? I don't think that they're the only, but when I get boards from Hoffman, I don't buy his existing boards. I send him my custom file and have him, because I like the way I populate the boards better than the way he does it. But he does good FR4. The trouble is, because the way his machine's set up, he will only do it in the 3 1/4 is it 3 1/4, 3 1/8, 3 1/4 inch length. No, it's 3 1/8, 3 1/8 inch width, which can be a tough fit in some amps. It's a little bit wider, but it's good quality stuff. One of the issues is getting the length. A lot of FR4 isn't sold in the right length. Hey, Colin Demo. Can you use any IEC cable for any amp head, or do you need to match the current volts? Anything with 18 gauge or higher wire is fine. So that SJT or SVT cables are what they're called, and they're going to be fine. Is the difference between solid state watts and tube watts, or are they the same? I answer this in a video, amps under $500. Here's the difference. A watt is a watt. But when I say that a deluxe reverb is 22 watts, that is 22 watts measured at clean. By clean, you mean at X percentage of distortion. And so while the amp is 22 watts, it's 22 watts when the signal coming in is reproduced cleanly. It has more watts available above that. It may be a 30-watt amp when it's pushed, which means you're going to be overdriven and distorted and far from clean, but it's still putting out 30 watts at that point. A solid-state amp, a traditional solid-state amp, as far as the amplification in the output section, not talking about modeling of tube distortion or anything. I'm talking about the signal coming in. When solid-state gets as loud as it can get cleanly, it doesn't then have another, say maybe 22 watts solid-state. It can't get any louder than that without sounding awful. It gets really squared and horrible. So if you have a 22-watt tube amp, you may want to have a 50-watt solid-state amp to sound the same level, because you get past the clean point on the tube amp much faster than you think, and you're still loving the sound, and you're much higher than 22 watts. So yeah, that's the difference, is that a tube amp has got headroom beyond the rated wattage. It's distorted and overdriven, but we love that. Whereas a solid-state amp, once it gets to its limit, that's its limit. It sounds horrible. It can't give you any more than that, and you wouldn't want it to, because it's going to sound bad. If I could only choose one, what would be my preference? Tweed Deluxe or Blackface Princeton? What do I see as virtues, drawbacks of each one compared to one another? It depends on what gigs I had to do. If I were a jazz player, I'd choose the Princeton anytime, because I don't need the dirt and I want the reverb. If I were doing rock or country, I would choose the Tweed Deluxe. It still has a great clean sound. I can use pedals for the other stuff, but then it has all the hair that the Princeton really doesn't do well. I would prefer to have one of each, but it depends on what style of music you play. And a great player would figure out what that amp was what that amp's strengths were, and play to that. Let's see, question. I hit the wrong button, sorry. Yeah, Martin, I need to figure out a way to do what we've done on vacation video, but most people wouldn't care. So I'd love to do a small scale one. Maybe if I set up the what do you call it? Patreon thing. That'd be a Patreon perk. In addition to other things, not just getting to see pictures, but yeah, I would love to do that, because I love talking about that stuff. But I know that most people are here to ask me about amplifiers. Been wanting to build a Vox style amp. Mojitone's kit is about the closest thing, but it's 15 watts, I believe, only, and it involves compromises, but it's a good choice. No idea on a GA85 ensemble, Paul Johnson. Sorry. Yeah, Brad can do all the stuff I do on a deluxe reverb reissue. Have I experimented at all with different types of bright caps, polyester film or silver mic instead of ceramic? Yeah, I've tried everything out there, and I've made decade boxes for myself where I'm blind testing positions 1 through 7, and I don't know what which is which, and I have my wife. I've had my wife flip the switch, so I don't even know what's on. And I've done it with the looper pedal, so the performance was the same, and listen blindly, and I have my preferences. Thank you, Steve Smith. Appreciate that very much. Very kind of you. I can go buy a belt. Hey, Dan Broach. The trouble with the all orange amps made today, is that not the pots are mounted on the board. Mounting the pots on the board is fine. The problem is they have those really long shafts on those pots, and those shafts are made of really cheap soft metal, and they're they have really long split shaft splined shafts on the pots, and then they have set screw knobs on those really long knurled split shaft pots. So not only will the whole thing shear off if you touch it too hard or look at it funny, but the very act of tightening the set screw of the knob damages that pot metal shaft, the split shaft on the pots. And the only replacement is another PCB mounted one with the exact same long knurling, because of the dimensions necessary. It's not a good design. They should have first of all, they should have used a different layout so they could use regular shaft pots. Second of all, they should have had solid shafts to use with the set screws. But the issue is not that it's board mounted. The issue is that it's a piece of shit mounted to a pretty good board. Hey, Frank. Thank you for the kind words on the minty fresh one last night. Meant a lot to me. I mean that. Hey, J Junior 2007. The trim on his 20-watt creamer, I guess it's Milkman, is always on even when depth and speed are on 1. It's been that way since I bought it used. Is that normal? Thank you. I don't know the Milkman creamer, but I imagine that they did it so that when no foot switch is present, the tremolo is always on. You have to use a foot switch to turn it off, in which case contact Milkman and see if there's a way they could send you a dummy plug to put in there if you don't use a foot switch. That's probably what's going on. But either way, contact Milkman, because they will know their circuit. And the solution probably is very, very simple. Hey, Milo, I'm glad that the grounding scheme video helped. It's the core stuff you've got to get right. And so many companies don't. And so many kit builds don't, because the instructions don't, and it's kind of it's the wrong part of this art to get lost. Let's see. Let's see. I've never met Mark Sampson, and I have a lot of respect for Mark and his accomplishments, even if I disagree with him on how to sanely bias an EL84. I respect what he accomplished, and I don't think he ever set out to build anything bad. And if you go back to 1987, when Matchless made the scene, if you compare what he was putting out to what Vox and Fender and Marshall were putting out, his stuff was head and shoulders the best of the bunch at a time when all the major companies were just making some really shitty stuff. So, lots of respect for the man. I still think that Matchlesses are overbuilt in bad ways, and I still think that they are biased way the hell too hot. And I still think that can clamps are not a good idea on glass tubes. But that doesn't take away my respect for Mark and his accomplishments. So if any of his friends or family hear this, my condolences and a lot of respect for the great stuff he did. Hey, Frank, what are some tips for evaluating whether a local amp tech can be trusted, especially where not much word of mouth or consumer ratings aren't available? Good questions to ask, etc. That's a whole can of worms. Let's see. If I had an amp and I was in a new city, or it was a tough thing to do, to know whether someone's trustworthy with something expensive, I might go so far as to create a minor issue and see what their diagnosis is. Like, let's see, something simple that would not cause any real damage, but if it's a hand-wired amp, disconnect one cathode ground wire on a preamp tube, and then see if he's gonna want to sell you a recap job or tell you need a new transformer, or whether he says, "Hey, yeah, you had a cathode come disconnected on V2. I reconnected it for you," and that's a pretty good test. It's like I saw a 60 Minutes thing where they had a water tank, hot water tank in someone's home, and they very, very slightly loosened the supply line, so there's a tiny little leak. And like 7 plumbers in a row said, "Hey, you got a tiny little leak. I'll tighten that up." Some of them didn't even charge for the visit. But the 8th plumber on camera tried to sell them a whole new water tank and how the whole thing was rusted out and blah, 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 blah. So, I would say if you really have questions, do something where you already know the real solution and see if they come up with it. Hey, BJ Mivok. Got a used 65 Deluxe Reverb. It's got a Ruby tank. It's probably aftermarket. It's possible that Fender used the Rubies for a while, but typically they use I can't think, Belton Accutronics. And the Ruby is the same thing as the MOD. It's a pretty good tank. I have not had a chance to open up an EVH 5150 Iconic yet because I would probably decline to work on one of those. I'm just not interested. They're not going to be built any better than the big 5150, and the big 5150 is terrible. Let's see. Let me scroll past the comments on my ass. I've got a small puncture and a vintage Celestion Alnico Blue. Best repair, just keep playing. Doesn't impact the sound currently. A tiny puncture is not terrible. I wouldn't do anything expensive to repair it, but I would probably get some tissue paper and a little bit of rubber cement and just put a tiny little patch on that, just so that little puncture can't turn into a tear. Sorry to go Super Mario on you guys. Ike liked my butt. All right. Ike is my only fan. Sweet. Let's see. Ah, Jesus Christ. God damn. See if I ever show you guys something on a pod again. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to get to the next question. David S. For the input stage grid stoppers, any reason not to mount them at the socket? Are they more susceptible to any type of hum at the socket? It's always better in theory to have them at the socket. They're usually mounted at the input jack for mechanical connections because there's more mechanical strength available there. One common trick is to have most of the screen grid resistor resistance. Sorry, not screen grids. Most of the grid stopper resistance at the jack, and then have a smaller amount of resistance at the socket. It also depends on whether you're doing a high gain and low gain thing where you've got a voltage divider. If you have a voltage divider, it's much better to have that at the jack. Say maybe you've got your, instead of like 68K, you might do 56K, and then put a 10K right at the socket. That way you only need to run one wire to the socket. Oh, Coffee Fairy. Made sure my pants were up before I stood up. Let's see. What was I saying? Because if you do the high low gain voltage dividers at the socket, you've got to run two wires there, and it's just a lot more stress on the connections. You don't want to have two wires going to two resistors going to a tube socket pin when you can have one wire to one resistor going to a tube socket pin, or usually you can just have the one wire going to the socket and have the resistors at the input jacks. But in general, on paper, it is best to have the grid stoppers as close to the grid itself as possible. Let's see. Is there a recommendation for a treble boost clone I prefer? I haven't tried most of the ones on the market. I've built them myself, and I do like the ones which give you a variable boost. So it's not just the old treble, but you can bring it down as well. And most of the stuff that Brian May has been using for a long time does that. But I'm not sure what all is on the market these days. Oh, wow, this coffee is better than the previous coffee. Yeah, so I saw the sex bots talking in various languages about how, and they figured out how to subscribe. So I appreciate you taking care of that long before the stream even started. May have to take more steps in the future. The bots are fun, aren't they? Is that where total harmonic distortion stats come in? Paul Quinn asks. Yeah, it's similar to that. Total harmonic distortion is really usually more important to people doing hi-fi stuff because they want to know how clean it is, really clean. Guitar amps, people don't really care about how perfectly clean it is. It's not even a goal, let alone something which is attainable. But yeah, it's the same thing. THD. We're looking at much higher THD at a clean rating of say a 22-watt deluxe reverb versus if it were a Macintosh or similar hi-fi tube amp. I don't know any techs in Oklahoma, Josh. I'm sorry. I don't know that if I know anyone in Oklahoma. If anyone in the chat here is from Oklahoma, I apologize. I didn't mean to exclude you. You know, but Oklahoma, it's okay. Let's see. Hey, Rob Hunter is from British Columbia. Any good source for mini pots? He's got an 80s Legend Model A30 combo amp. All the pots are mini and various values taper and some are stepped. Well, I need more than mini. Are they 16 millimeters? Are they 9 millimeters? Are they 7 millimeters? Can you get that information? But most of those pots are available from places like Mauser, tubesandmore.com, and Small Bear Electronics. Small Bear Electronics carries an awful lot of the common values for the very small mini stuff, like the little green square ones, but I don't know which ones you mean by mini. Sorry. Let's see. I'm looking for the next question. I have not serviced a Kendrick. I have serviced a Diaz, which is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. But Caesar had already passed by the time someone put that out there with his name on it. But I have not looked at a Kendrick. I mean, I know what they are. They're from my knowledge of having seen inside them, I would say Victoria is doing that same trick better. I think Kendrick got a little bit up its own butt as far as Kendrick capacitors, like those crappy caps that were in that 64 Custom as it came in. Unless your name is Sprague or Vishay or Nishikon, you're not making capacitors. I don't like that Seriatone does the same thing. Just, I don't like relabeled things for branding where branding is inappropriate. It's like me taking this iPhone with this case, and if I had a case that said Sonic Audio, I didn't make the iPhone. I bought a piece of plastic that had my brand on it. Let's see. Christopher Sambuco, Deluxe River B Plus dropping resistors 10K versus 2.2K 10K. My thoughts on sound tone qualities. 10K was done with the GZ34. The GZ34 has got less of a voltage drop than a 5U4GB. About 6970, they changed from the GZ34 to the 5U4GB. I think because wall voltages were increasing, they needed to keep the B plus down for 6V6 tubes. So they changed to the 5U4GB, same power transformer, handles it just fine. So with wall voltages increasing, going to the 5U4, it lowered the B plus, but it also lowered because it draws more current, it lowered the gain available to the phase inverter and preamp nodes too much. So they changed from that 10K to a 2.2, or is it 2.7K? I don't remember. One of those. Anyway, they changed that resistor because they also changed the GZ34 to the 5U4GB because wall voltage had gone up 7 volts over that period of the 60s. So it's not just a matter of 10K versus 2.2K 10K. It has to be with wall voltage and the rectifier tube in consideration. So the 120 volts out of the wall, 5U4GB, 2.2K 10K is going to sound a lot like 114 volts out of the wall, GZ34 10K. Does that make sense? Hey, Phil and Catherine Muzio. Thank you for being here. He uses a 65 Princeton reverb. Can I direct them to a proper procedure for setting the bias, please? I don't like telling people on the internet how to do a bias because the way I do it is dangerous and involves an awful lot of knowledge ahead of time. I would suggest that you go to tubedepot.com and order their bias right setup, which comes with instructions, and then going to Rob Robinette's site. Brad, can you put a link to Rob's site in the thing for me? Rob Robinette has got a whole page on how to set the bias for different tube types, and that would probably be the best way for most owners to do it with external bias right stuff, where you have the probes and a meter. That way you're not exposing yourself to electricity, and you don't have to learn an awful lot. You just have to follow the directions and do it carefully and slowly. And there's a lot of margin of error there using that setup because it doesn't factor in. It factors in a lot of other stuff. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. You are not my servant, and you're certainly not my employee, but you're handy-dandy to have around, and I appreciate you. All right, we are at the top of the hour. So we are going to get to Miragai's question when we come back from the first intermission, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk that way, and I'm going to be very, very modest. See you guys in 7 minutes. All right, here we are back. Let's see, where is that? Mirror Guy. Mirror Guy says, I recently bought an old JMF Spectra 225 from before they sold to DeMarco. It doesn't work, however, when running what usually fails first in old solid states like that. It's a big question. What usually fails in solid state amps is often push me, pull you. Old capacitors dry out, and power transistors fail. And power transistors often fail because of time, and they were heat sinked with the thermal compound, and that thermal compound dries up, becomes less effective, and the voltages get worse and worse because the cap's drying out, and then the power transistors fail. Now, on some models, you can still get the power transistors, and it's pretty easy to fix. A recap's usually not that big a deal. Depends on the resale value of the amp, whether you want to go down that road. But some of the old power transistors used 30 years ago and more have not been made for a really long time, and they're very expensive if and when you can find them. So they usually have an end of life, which is much greater than that, much smaller, shorter than that of a tube amp. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I'll take off the nagging thing. Let's see here. Yeah, you don't want to use nail polish on a speaker. Let's see. Anyone run a tube screamer into a Macintosh? Well, you could. It'd sound like ass because you need a preamp first. A Macintosh is not wanting the level out of a guitar, but you certainly could do that, Ted. But a tube screamer into some kind of preamp and then into the Macintosh would probably sound great. Macintoshes aren't too dissimilar from, say, an Ampeg B15. The B15 is not too dissimilar from a good preamp mated to a small Macintosh power section. That would be great sound. And B12N or B15N or an SVT makes a phenomenal clean guitar amp. Hey, Meryl. Nail polish can be an insulator. I use clear nail polish as an insulator. And you can use red or black as an insulator. What you don't want to have, there's a lot of nail polishes out there with sparkle or pearlescent things or iridescent things in them, and those can be conductive. So pure nail polish, sure. And I use clear nail polish for an insulator as necessary quite often. Let's see. People will be asking Brad questions, not me. Of course, Brad doesn't have a tendency to moon people as much. Let's see. Trying to get to the next question. Hey, RC, thank you very much. A reminder to people, if you want me to see your questions, please do put a question mark in front of the question or a string of them. It makes it stand out, so it's easier for me to see because I've got a lot of stuff on the screen and my eyes aren't the best. Can I recommend a speaker for the Acoustic A1000? Well, I don't know the Acoustic A1000 amp very well. I don't know what the wattage is. I don't know what the impedance is, and I don't know what the desired purpose is. I'm sorry, I can't answer here. I can look it up later if I can remember to, and maybe I'll be able to put that in the comments. I'm thinking after this video ends, this stream ends, I'm going to make it unlisted for a little bit. I've got a different thing to do this afternoon right after this. You know what I'm talking about, Brad. And then I will go back and edit out that one little portion, and then I'll republish it live for posterity, but not posteriority. Would it be hard to add a tremolo to an AC-10 or make a 65 Princeton sound more like the Vox? Hey, Yarb the Great, I would not modify an AC-10. I would get a tremolo pedal. There's a world of good sounding tremolo pedals out there, from very simple things to models of bias trims and harmonic trims and stuff. Like the Strymon Flint is one great choice. I know that I can't think of the other company's name right now. I was just talking to someone about this the other day, but Origin Effects has got some great sounding tremolo pedals. So I would just use a pedal. That way you can use the pedal with AC-10, or you can use the pedal with anything else you may get later. You can't make the 65 Princeton sound more like the AC-10. You can fudge it a little bit and remove negative feedback or whatever, but it's not going to be the same sound at all. Keep the Princeton being a Princeton. Keep the Vox being a Vox. And if you want sounds you can't get with the amp alone, the entire pedal industry is ready for your call. And it would be in my interest to say, yeah, here's how you do it, and send it to me, and I'll add this and this. I've had people want me to build them custom EQ pedals to make their solos thicker, and I'll find out that they're using a Fender thin pick, and I'll say, try a Jazz 3. I don't need to sell an EQ pedal just to sell something. Houston ROW's got a Fender concert from the 80s, does a weird fizzy buzz when he plays a low B. It could be a solder joint, could be something loose in your cabinet, could be a lot of mechanical things, could be a bad speaker, could be a bad choke in rare instances. It was a good fishy, and it went wherever I did go. Bonjour, Alain. Comment ça va? Let's see. Hey, Rhubarb Ranch. Yeah, I recommend that book by Merlin. I recommend Merlin's site all the damn time. Almost every chat, someone says, how do I learn about this? And I send them first to the valvewizard.co.uk website. And then if the information on the website whets their appetite and they want more, to get their book, the Merlin's book. So, fantastic book, resource. The kookaburras have all just woken up and are making a racket. Australian problems. Do you have any old gum trees in your neighborhood? That could be the issue. I have heard a laughing kookaburra. In every Tarzan movie ever, there's that sound. That is the sound of the jungle. The sound of the African jungle. It sounds like Australia and looks like a Hollywood set. Let's see. Hey, Captain Fineweather. The TADs, I've not had any problem with their EL84s, and I've had good and bad luck with the 12AX7s. Some of the 12AX7s have been instantly microphonic, even if I paid for them to be low microphonic, or they're advertised as low microphonic. Others I got were just fine. So if you're not having any problems, you've already passed the hurdle, because they don't just suddenly become microphonic a year later. They're pretty much bad in the first week. I've not had any problems with their 84s, and I don't know if I've tried their rectifiers, but your AC15C1 solid state rectifier, so your rectifier tube error proof, which is a nice place to be. So you're probably fine. Hey, Rob Hunter, 16 millimeter, that's usually going to be alpha. and alpha is going to have three form factors of interest to you. Some of them will have, being careful to pick up a potentiometer on the camera again. Some of them will have little solder lugs like this that wires go through. Some of them will have metal spikes that go out at right angles like this. They go into a PCB, and others will go out and then down. Those are right angle, and these are straight. So you're going to have either PCB mounted alphas or the through holes. Yours are probably the PCB, and you can get all those sizes and tapers and values that you need from tubesandmore.com, and you can get them from tubedepot.com, and you can get them from Mouser and Digitech if you're good at searching those sites, and you can get them from Small Bear Electronics. Now, Small Bear Electronics is frustrating because they used to be called smallbearelectronics.com. Now you've got it's something else, store something. So you got to put in Small Bear Electronics into Google, and they'll get you the actual site. I always have to do that. I don't remember what their new URL is. URL. People make fun of me for calling it URL, but it's URL, right? Come on, guys. It's URL. Let's see. Thank you, Juan. That's very kind of you. Yeah, that little engineer solder sucker, I had the previous gen too. They're really good. And I've had the little anodized ones, and I've had the big plastic solder pults and the Edisys and all. Is it Edison? Edisys? I've had all that stuff, and they all sucked. They would all clog. They would all, the spring would just get caked in stuff, and things would break. These little engineers are phenomenal, and they don't clog. They're very easy to clean, and the little Teflon rubber tubing is just fantastic because you can, it really forms a tiny seal around what you're doing, and so it actually can have some serious suction. And when it wears out, you just put a new bit on and snip it to length, and there you are. And they sell replacements for very little money. I like it when good things exist and are affordable. So for about $25, $30, it's a very good thing. And so far, they've lasted me about a year or two each. Thank you, Houston. I appreciate that. I don't want to be the person telling people what amps they must like or must dislike, but I do want to be the person saying, hey, this amp company thinks you're a moron and they're going to try to take your money. Don't let them, because you're not. You're not a moron. They're the morons. Let's see here. Thank you very much. Thanks, Uncle Ike. Appreciate that. 232 people are watching. Is that total who have watched? Because I imagine a big chunk of them tuned out when I stood up and turned around earlier. Ugh. Hey, Carl Schmidt, what are the most common issues with the 69 or 70 twin reverb that I encounter? I picked one up yesterday, and it sounds great, but it has some hiss and hum. It's off to the tech in a few days. Well, usually the issues with that era of twin, the issues get much greater after about 73. 69, 70, you're still in a real sweet period. I think the 6970 has the heater balance adjustment pot. Those fail. I replace those with 100 ohm resistors. No balance pot necessary. That has the bias balance, but no way to set the overall bias level. I've shown in a lot of my videos how to add a second trim pot to the existing bias balance pot that gives you balance and overall level adjustment. And starting in 69, Fender started using different taper pots. Sometimes they would use linear taper because they had them on hand. And so especially on a bass pot, it can make the channel kind of woofy. So you want to make sure that they have J taper, so 20 to 30% taper pots on the volume and treble pots, and then you want to have audio log 10% taper on the middle and bass. And if they got a linear on the bass, it'll get woofy. Just don't turn it up over 3 or change the pot out. The other thing is, I believe starting about 69, they started changing the phase inverter, like I showed in that video on the Deluxe Reverb yesterday from 73, where they would go to the 330K grid leaks on the phase inverter input, but they changed the input cap from 1 nanofarad to 10 nanofarad, which also makes it kind of flubby on the lows. Change that out to a 3 nanofarad or 3.3 nanofarad, and that balances it out. They didn't have the master volume yet by 6970, but if someone hears this and is thinking about checklists for their twin, if they have a master volume, the push-pull thing, or just the master volume, if it has the bright cap, desolder one end of the bright cap, and the master volume sounds much, much better. Beyond that, they're really bulletproof, and there's not much difference between 6970 and 6667. Pastor Ben Tonnett, well, please ask the most wonderful question. And if it's too fit in the margins, break it up into little chunks, and I'll try to piece it together. In fact, why don't you go ahead and get it typed up in like a notepad if you're on your computer, and then you can paste it back to back so that I won't have to search too much for it. I understand how frustrating it is trying to fit everything in the margin. Hey, what red brew was that? I don't remember what it was called. It was a fantastic beer that I had in a restaurant in Vienna almost 2 years ago today. And I was missing Vienna and missing that day and missing that beer and that meal. So, hey, Derek, that's not a pedal in your pocket. Hey, and Dawson, on a Silverface, do you need to completely strip the components in order to de-wax the cardboard? In order to do it thoroughly, you need to remove everything and take the whole thing out of the amp. But usually, I can get away with removing strategic components and removing the bottom slider board and getting that out of the amp, and then I'll put paper towels between the chassis and the remaining board, and doing all the work there with the heat gun to drive stuff out. And the wax that heats up on the back of the board tends to stick to the paper towel. Then I heat it up again, I pull the paper towel out, and it kind of gets most of that out. So usually I don't have to do the full heroics, but it is so critical to get the wax off. And most of the wax, which is conductive, is on top of the board, because that's where all the yucky stuff in the air settles into the warm wax and becomes embedded and becomes conductive over time. There's an old gum tree every few meters. Well, then merry, merry, merry as the loon will they be. Uncle Ike asks, have I found that some overdrive pedals seem to play nicer in front of AC-15s and AC-30s than others? Yeah, but that's going to be the same thing with Marshalls and the same thing with Deluxe Reverbs and Twin Reverbs. Some pedals pair better with certain amps than others, and the thing you always have to remember is that the amp pedal or the pedal sound that you absolutely hate is someone else's absolute favorite, and vice versa. It gets very subjective. But yeah, there are certain things certain circuits and certain amps just go well together. Like I think and the certain pedals seem to work well with everything, but like the Hotcake, the Crowther Hotcake, really does well with the Vox and Vox style amps, and sounds okay into a Fender. It's okay. Would you lose anything sonically by building a version of an amp like a Pro Reverb that omits the normal channel? Nick Orr asks. So basically, a vibrato channel only per reverb. Well, as long as you adjust the gain at the input, of the phase inverter, such that, because in the stock one there's a divider there where the two mix resistors are, so that lowers the level of the vibrato channel going to the phase inverter. You've got to offset the absence of the normal channel there and have that same reduction. You can calculate that. Beyond that, if you don't have the normal channel, you're going to have a little less preamp tube current, so your B plus is going to be a little bit higher. You can offset by that. You can offset that by increasing the size of the dropping resistors. So maybe go from 4.7K to maybe 6.8K. And you will also need to remember that V2B and V1B in the normal channel share a 820 ohm cathode resistor. So you have 820 bypassed by 22 or 25 microfarad, and that is shared. If you're going to single that out, you need to change that resistor to 1.5K, and you need to have the value of that cap, so maybe 1.5K and 10K and 10 microfarad. At that point, it'll be fairly indistinguishable from a two-channel, normal Pro Reverb. Joseph says, "Hey man, I got a Badger 35 wired up, great model from Sir, wired up into a budget attenuator. I use a speaker cable going from the amp to the attenuator, but an instrument cable going from the attenuator to the speaker. Is this bad? That's bad. That's really bad. Please don't do that. You will damage your speaker, you will damage your attenuator, and you're very likely eventually will damage the very expensive Sir Badger 35. Go get a speaker cable. Speaker cable and instrument cables are not interchangeable. If you use a speaker cable as an instrument cable, you will have noise. If you use a instrument cable for a speaker cable, odds are you will burn something because it's not rated for the current. Please, 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 please. I'm glad that you've gotten away with it now. Don't try it anymore. And I'm not talking down to you, and I'm not talking specifically just to you. I want people to really take this away from this video. They are not ever interchangeable. Please. I disagree with you, Brad. I mean, it's not the worst possible setup, but you're just hoping against hope because you're still passing that current through a cable not rated for it. And I don't trust cheap attenuators either. Hey, Dustin. Yeah, I said at the beginning of the stream, YouTube servers have been having hiccups. So if you get dropouts, audio dropouts, video dropouts, whatever, leave and come back in. Usually it works, but that's a YouTube server thing. Hey, Daniel Mincher, do you guys repair any digital amps? Got a guy with a spark issue and ordered a new preamp chip to fix it, but to be honest, he's not confident. Well, the trouble with a lot of the digital stuff is that they don't release schematics unless you're an authorized service center, and I have no wish to be an authorized service center for Boss, so they're not going to pay for shit, and I don't want to do all the paperwork and justify my decisions. So they don't share schematics, and a lot of the stuff is not built to be field serviceable. They just, if it's under warranty, they just send you a new board, pop the whole new board in. If it's out of warranty, it sucks to be you. So it's a tough situation. Hopefully the preamp chip takes care of it. I've had digital amps in that I have been like, okay, well, yeah, this obviously it's got a bad electrolytic here, and I'll change that out. And I've had digital amps where I'm pretty sure it's this big power transistor that's got like 32 connections to it. But because I don't have the schematic, I don't know what's driving that. I don't know what other things to check. I don't want to change out that transistor and have the guy be 2 hours into a repair bill, and for that not to be the only problem, or for something else to be wrong in the amp that will nuke the new transistor, because I don't have a schematic, and I can't spend 8 hours tracing the whole thing out. I have to bill the client $1,000 just to figure out what's wrong with it. If it turns out to be a 2-cent resistor, if I had the fucking schematic, but they don't want to give that out because someone might steal their great ideas. Thank you, Matthew Muziani. This is fun for me, except for when I do the occasional thing where I show my ass. Okay, good. Engineers are cheapest at DigiKey Mauser, $26 delivered. That's good to know. Thank you, Ted. Floridian asks some important questions. Do the gum trees in Australia drop balls for the elderly to trip on and break their bones like gum trees in the United States? Well, it's not just a matter that they take out the old people. They're also fantastic ammunition for kids because, you collect all those and you throw them at your friends like little call trips. Hey, Jorge, he's building a twin champ from a 5F1 circuit and 2 8-ohm speakers in parallel. The output transformer is 4-ohm out. Any power transformer considerations? Thanks. I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, it's a champ. You just need a champ with if you got 2 8-ohms in parallel, you're at 4 ohms, so you're good to go. You're not going to get too many. You're not going to have any extra watts if you change out the power transformer. I don't think. I don't think it'd be an issue whatsoever. What's the most live viewers I've ever had? I don't know, Brad, because I don't look at those specs at the time. When I finish one of these, it's usually like a 1.2K within an hour or so. So I know that there's a reason for me to do these, but I can't spend too much time worrying about the numbers on the channel because it's so out of my control and doesn't affect anything in the real world. I mean, I get a little bit of money from the channel every month, but that's not why I do this. Let's see. Hey, Ted, any experience with the Gibson GA20 RVT and Gibson GA40 RVT reissue tube amps? Well, Brad's got a video on the new Mesa-made Gibson reissues. I've not had any, and I'll pray for them. Hey, Mike the Bike 675, cheers from Greece. Well, thanks for being here. He wants my opinion on his new acquisitions. Well, list them and I'll give them. Tor, welcome back. Tor bought a Bagcat Era 30, really impressed with it. I understand there's a difference in quality between Bagcat eras. What has been my experience with current modern hand-wired Bagcats? I don't have any experience with the more recent stuff. I've heard that they're really making some big improvements, and I hope that is the case because I think we need more good things in this world. Most of the Bagcats I've worked on have been from 10 years ago and longer, and they've been of varying degrees of quality and varying degrees of common issues, but I hope that they're just knocking it out of the park. He's got a Vox AC30 top boost made in the UK. Okay, cool. Fender Twin 135 watts and a Vibrolux 1979. You got 3 amps, any of which can be absolutely fantastic. Odds are all 3 we're going to need a little bit of work. I've got videos on my channel on things you can do to the TBX series to get rid of the built-in ground loops. It just hurts my head thinking that they release some of these things to the public. You're supposed to test things before you go into production, and if your amp goes all the time, you're not done yet. And it kills me that people buy it and say, "Oh, it's made in England, so it's fantastic." Some of the shittiest cars in the world were made in England. I'm an Anglophile, but it doesn't mean that everything that they do is perfect. I mean, the whole little thing with India, not so great. But, the TBX is a great amp once you finish the prototype for them. The Twin 135 watt, I think, is a great amp. You need some dewaxing typically, some spaghetti removed. You can see my video yesterday on the 73 Deluxe Reverb that shows that the beginning of that process. And the same for the 79 Vibrolux. So the Vibrolux and the Deluxe Reverb among all the 70s Fenders were messed with the least. CBS did the least, made the fewest changes to those models. So those are always not too far away from what Leo intended. The Twin 135 watt is in some ways pretty far removed, but it's still a very good amp and can be made phenomenal. So I think you did really well, Mike the Bike. Hey, Zebeche 95, I guess that's how to pronounce that. Sorry, I try my best. Thank you very much. Looking for a 5F1 kit. Do I recommend any in particular? Should I stay away from any brand in particular? Yeah, always avoid Weber kits. Weber kits are absolute trash from beginning to end. Every part of it is bad. Their speakers are great. I don't understand how they can make those kits with the crappy transformers and the crappy chassis and just everything the cheapest of the cheap. Just go Mojotone. There's one other company, I can't remember the name of it, and some of the other companies like Mission Apps are no longer doing it. Just go Mojotone. If you can't build a great sounding 5F1 from a Mojotone kit, you weren't going to build a great sounding 5F1 anyway, no matter what you did. And if you make a great sounding 5F1 kit from Mojotone, and then you learn more about amps, and you come back 3 to 5 years later, you might want to go back and tweak a few things that were good in the kit that could be improved upon later once you have more knowledge. But there's nothing wrong with the kit at all. Why does everyone rave about the 50s wiring in Les Paul versus other wiring schemes? Because it sucks the least. Doesn't have 300K pots. The volumes do the thing that they're supposed to do. And you can do all the tricks, including having one pick up off and toggling back and forth between nothing and full tilt. And you can do all the stuff, Hendrix kind of stuff and Page stuff. And as you roll back the volume, it doesn't get dark, and which means that you can have a really nice, clean sound when the volume's rolled back with a lot of high end. And then you turn the volume up, and the tone circuit kicks in, and you have a smooth, buttery lead. Because as you turn the volume down on the guitar, the tones pot does less and less. So you can roll the tone back to 7 for your lead sound, roll the guitar volume down to like 5 for a nice clean sound with lots of high end, turn the guitar up to 10. Hey, the amp's breaking up, amp's saturated, and now that tone circuit's rolling off the highs. It's fantastic, and it's easy to do, and they should never have changed that. And you can also do that same tone circuit wiring trick on a Strat or a Tele. Hey, Rob Hunter, do I wear my watch while working on tube amps? I worked with an old Austrian tech years ago who told me his horror story of his watch touching a component and left him shocked and scarred. Well, I do, and it depends on the watch. Like I'm wearing a bracelet watch now, and this is all metal, so if I were to touch the chassis with that, I could get a shock through that. But again, I could get a shock through my flesh if I wear that. And other watches I have leather straps, a little less dangerous with the leather. If I were just wearing a watch for bench purposes, I just wear my G-Shock all the time. In fact, I sent Brad a G-Shock because it suits him perfectly. And you cannot get shocked through that G-Shock except maybe through the metal buckle. But again, that'd be your skin touching it anyway. it's not a matter about the watch hurting me through the amp. It's a matter of I don't want to mess up the watch. And some of my better watches I won't wear if I'm working inside a speaker cabinet. I don't want them to get magnetized. Oh, well, Brad, you fucking earned it. Brad had a really nice watch Michelle gave him, but it was made of wood, which is not a great thing when you're working on around metal chassis. And his watch was getting beat up, so I sent him a very rugged G-Shock, same thing I've got, and I love that thing. Whenever I'm there doing home repairs, that's the one I put on. If I'm doing any grunt work, that's the one I put on. It's indestructible. But I'm not really worried about this hurting me when I'm working in an amp. I'm worrying about the amp possibly hurting one of these. So. I am more stylish in many ways than Brad, but he has that majestic growth from the lower part of his face. So, I can't compete with that. But I also have the same rockin' Casio that Brad has because it's just, for a tech, it is so perfect. It's solar powered. It's does all these things, and it just looks like, something Special Forces would wear. Or Brad. Hey, Ben James Andrews, you got a Laney Lionheart 50-watt head and love it to bits. Is the 20-watt combo version worth it, or should I just go ahead and buy a Fender Deluxe Reverb? I can't answer that for you. I've had the 20-watt combo version of the Lionheart in, and I thought it was a good amp. I didn't think it was a great amp or had the potential to ever be a great amp, but I thought it was a very good amp. The Fender Deluxe Reverb 65 reissue, not the 68 and not the 64 custom. The 65 reissue is also a very good amp, but it can be made to be a great amp. In fact, a client dropped off a 68 custom reissue for me to fix all the problems the 68 has, which the 65 doesn't have. Other than that, I'm going to do the same mods to it that the 65 gets for longevity. And with that came a new speaker. He brought me a Warehouse WGS G12C to install because the stock speaker sucks. And the stock speaker and all the reissue Fenders tends to suck, except for a few limited editions that have creambacks. So if you play the stock Laney and the stock Fender Deluxe Reverb, they may be very comparable sounding. But I'll tell you that the Deluxe Reverb can be taken to the next level, and the Laney really cannot. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your Lionheart 50. I just thought the 20 was it was a good amp, and I don't think about it much beyond that. Testing 1, 2, I am absolutely not arguing with you. But most people starting out building kits have no possible way of knowing what components to order or how to order the components. And so a good kit like Mojitone, I think StewMac is the same kit. I think StewMac is getting them from Mojitone. It's a partnership they have to expand each other's visibility with each other's existing customer bases. They're good parts, and everything that you need is there. And later, if you want to go in and make changes, you can when you learn more about this. But most people can't even order the pots and cap that they need to do their Telecaster without a lot of hand holding. So I think the kits serve a good role for people. A good kit serves a good role. Yeah, I've got like 10 Casios. I love Casios. I've got so many of them. I've got them most of them are under $30. I've only got 2 expensive Casios. I've got 2 G-Shocks. All the others are cheap little things. I've got one I keep in my car just in case I ever need to drop off a watch for service and don't have something to wear. And I've got one right there on the little tool holder because it fits in that spot perfectly, and it has a wonderful stop timer function. So if I have an amp come in, I need to know how many billable hours on an amp is. I can press the start. If I need to go get a cup of coffee, I'll press it again. It'll pause, and I press it again, it resumes, and then I can say, all right, I worked 1 hour and 47 minutes on this app. And I can do that with my phone or my computers, but I'd have to call up the thing and think about it as opposed to, oh, button pushed for that mode, button that pushed to start. Done. It's always right there. See, Brad, that's what I'm talking about. That same functions on your G-Shock. You could just go to timer, press start, and work. You want to go get a sandwich, press. It'll stop the time. Come back, press it again. It'll resume the timer, and then you can say, "All right, I'm done." Oh, 2 hours and 13 minutes. And you don't have to think about it during that. You don't have to have your phone doing. You don't have to say, "Hey Siri," et cetera, et cetera. Because mentally keeping up with how much time has elapsed is way too much math for us to do in the middle of the day. Let's see. Oh, come on, Curtis Price. I like that everyone gets to talk to each other in this. This is not just about me. It's about you guys talking to each other and forming a community of musicians from all around the world. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't know that you'd need an attenuator with a Badger. I think they do have power scaling testing one too. But yeah, absolutely. We don't need those thinking attenuators. We have Badgers. To any of my Latino friends, I apologize, and I think you know where my heart's in the right place. I'm making fun of the movie quote, not any cultures. Are there any quality improvements that two manufacturers can achieve, such as material coatings that can result in lower noise, greater consistency, and longer lasting? Well, Tim, yeah, there are, but those are only going to be there if the market demands it, and starting in 2019 and 2020, people were likely to get anything. So it's only now that traditional market pressure can increase quality. A lot of those companies were so desperate to get anything out onto the market that whatever made a noise was sold, and people were so desperate to have something that they just bought stuff. It's not like there's competition to say who can build the best thing for the lowest price right now. That always has been the case, and I hope that it gets back to that point where they have to hold themselves to a certain standard in order for people to buy them. But at the same time, they can make absolute shit, claim that it's cryogenically frozen, and sell it to you for $80. Hey, Plum Bug Music. I don't remember. I don't remember what that was because it was in German. That was taken in Vienna. I think I just said, "Hey, what are the most popular beers that people order?" Because the waiter had very good English and was very nice. And I found that when I travel, if I say, "Hey, what do the locals really like?" and I try it, I either really like it or at least I've really tried it. Which works much better with beer in Vienna than it does with sardines in Portugal, in my experience. But I tried them. My favorite beer in general that I've had, I really like the Edelweiss, not Edelweiss, sorry. That was our joke. We sang the Edelweiss song, but it's Edelstoff. Edelstoff in Vienna, which is a Bavarian beer. Edelstoff I really liked. And in England, I really liked London Pride, which was a cask ale, and it's not as touristy an ale as the name would suggest. And it was a bit, it's fucking close to water. Magisterium. Sorry, I went Cockney instead of Australian for the Eric Idle thing there. But I think I really like the London Pride. I had quite a few other Cascales, but that was the one that really sticks in my memory. And the Edelstoff in Vienna was fantastic. Thoughts on shielding reverb tanks? Reverb tanks are already shielded on all sides but one. And if you want, the last one is usually got a piece of cardboard. You can wrap that cardboard in aluminum foil and then screw the tank to the cardboard and viola. The main thing about reverb tanks, I'm going to be very careful showing this because I've got to bend over to get this. All right. Say the top of the screen is the front of the amplifier. And we're looking down from the top. If you install the tank like this, with the RCA jacks pointing towards the rear of the amp, you're going to get a lot of buzz. If you flip the tank around, so the RCA jacks are facing towards the front of the amp, it's quiet. And so even with the bottom fully shielded, like actually, shielding the cardboard wouldn't work if you have these. A lot of tanks don't have these isolations. It really doesn't matter. The shielding matters is up top in most applications, and even if you had the thing fully shielded, it's at the RCA jack itself that the weakness is. So this quiet, this noisy. Let's see. Coming up on the second break, we're going to end today's stream about 3:45. So we're going to do the last hour is only going to be 45 minutes because I've got a thing I've got to do at 4 o'clock. So I'll try to get through as many as I can. Hey, Barry Thomas, got a 77 high watt SA112 combo. Would like to mod it so that blah, blah, blah. I stopped reading it right there. If you got a 77 high watt, don't mod it. It's a good amp. It's an example of what that is. If that's not the amp that you want, then you can buy something else or sell it and get something else. But if you want to run the bright input to both preamps in parallel, just use a jumper cable. It worked for David Gilmour on his DR103s. It'll work for you, and David Gilmour certainly sounds okay. Unless the SA112 has only got 2 inputs, in which case, you can move a wire so that the one input jack feeds both. But in general, especially with very rare amps like high watts from the 70s and all, be very cautious making modifications because it's like refinishing a coffee table. Well, it would have been worth $10,000 when it was all beat up and original, but now it's worth about $200 because you refinished it. Not quite as extreme with input jack stuff, but as a general rule of thumb, try to avoid that kind of stuff. I'm all about odd side chats, man. And you took down a gum tree to save your mother-in-law. Not many guys will do anything to save their mother-in-law, so you're awesome out there, man. Do I have any thoughts on the chrome Weber chassis? Yeah, it's an absolute piece of shit with chrome on it, and the chrome will flake off. Don't buy Weber chassis at all. Don't buy Weber kits. Unless it's a speaker, you don't want to buy from Weber. Their pots are also horrible. Hey, Garin Hill's got a Rivera Venus Durem. They talk about using 6V6 tubes and EL34. Are they interchangeable in that app? Only one manual on their website. I don't know if they mean that you can use both at the same time or whether you can alternate them. I would almost assume that they mean that they can use either kind in that amp and that it's probably cathode bias and you can use 6v6s or EL34s and either will be safe. But I don't have any direct knowledge of that amp and I cannot look it up at this moment. I would contact Rivera. They are still in business and they will have the answer, and they are very friendly people. Call them or ask someone. I don't know if you're in the United States, or if they don't have an international phone number, ask someone in the United States to call them for you. But it's probably one friendly phone call away from knowing that. Why didn't the British ever make a supercomputer? They couldn't figure out how to make it leak oil. Hey, DP Pawns 69, DB Pawns 69, or whatever I'm supposed to pronounce that. He wants to make a Princeton without a tremolo or reverb, thus 3 gain stages but with a long-tailed phase inverter. All right. What can I do with the extra triode? Another gain stage? You can do an extra gain stage, or you could do a parallel setup of existing gain stage, so you'd have a little more, a little less of a noise floor and a little more current capability, or you can just leave it empty. Most guys would probably instantly want to do an extra gain stage, but it's tricky to do that in a Princeton with the existing front panel unless you're building it. If you're building the whole thing and you have a choice of what the knobs, what pots and knobs there are and what they do, then you can do something with that. In which case, it'd be very easy to add in a little extra Dumble-y overdrive thing. All right, we are pretty much at the top of the next hour. We're going to take another 7-minute intermission, and then I'll try to speed through the remaining questions. So I'll see you guys in just a few. Thank you. All right, we are back. People talking about Bond and stuff. We'll get there. We'll get there. Let's see. I've never seen Uncle Doug's face. I've just seen his dog. I really admire Uncle Doug, and I don't see myself as any kind of competition. But thank you. Yeah, I think it's a compliment. Yeah, we still have a few chestnuts here. One of the things I saw in London that really surprised me. Hey, look, now Brad and I match. We're matchy. Was an elm tree. Most of the elm trees have been gone from here for forever. Most of the elm trees, apparently, in England are also gone. But there's this beautiful old elm outside a church in London, and I had not seen an elm in so long. It was very nice to see that. That was just south of the Euston Road in I'm not sure what the neighborhood there was called. I guess it's just for those who know who city who care. It's just west of College of London, City College London. One of the beautiful old churches where the church was still functioning, but half of it disappeared in the Blitz. So see a Floridian. Mike the Bike, you are in good shape. Yeah, that thing's going to be phenomenal. It's just, especially with the JBLs, you're going to need someone to carry it for you unless you're a big dude. But, always never put, if you can avoid it, don't put the casters on an amp. Get a shelf with casters to move the amp into places, then take it off the shelf for playing. They're spiky. Gooden. You don't know what gumtree balls are? They're painfully spiky. Awesome for ammunition. See ya, Uncle Ike. Let's see. People talking about people talking about British cars, special forces, as in special ed. No, special forces. Well, maybe in your case, Brad, but special forces, as in the guys that we're all told we should be like, well-managed psychopaths. Very admirable. Speaking of Bond, I'm last question. Ever see a Silvertone 1433? I probably have. But I don't recall. I'm not a big fan of Silvertones. I know that everyone drinks the Jack White Kool-Aid, but I prefer the Jack Black Kool-Aid. Nick, or if you have problems with it, yeah, it would be worth changing. Until such time, I wouldn't change out a chassis. It's just much better to not use the Weber chassis to begin with. But once it's done, it's a lot of money to throw at it just to get back to where you could have been from the start. Mojitone chassis is what, $60? So how much did they possibly save getting the crappy Weber? Let's see. I don't have any experience with an SBL reducer from Tone Hunter. I'm sorry. I am attenuators are dangerous things because all that stuff that all the wattage, let's just be simple about it. Say, when you turn down the wattage, when you turn down the level, that form of energy has to change into another form of energy, and that other form of energy is heat. And so if it's not built right and it gets hot, bad things happen. Recommendations of Champ and Harvard clones. Well, I don't keep up with clones. I'm not interested too much in clones. Again, I know that Weber has some kits for some of those, and it's certainly the Champs, but I don't keep track of clones. I don't follow that game. I see them, the clones and kit builds on Reverb, and if they show the inside, it's just frightening to me. What is a 1665 Great White, Martin? I want to know what the 1665 Great White is. Yeah, I love G-Shocks. I've got the 5610U, which is the solar that syncs up to the atomic time through radio signals. I sent Brad the same watch, but his doesn't sync up to the atomic time because they don't have that satellite in Australia yet. And then I've got the Casio, which is my dress G-Shock. But this is the one I wear most often because it's comfy. And nothing can hurt this thing. If anything hurts this and I'm wearing it at the time, I'm taking more damage than the watch is. Hey, Pastor Bentana is thinking of building a blonde brown panel fenders, 2mm aluminum chassis, drill them myself and make custom faceplates myself. I would not use aluminum chassis for those. I would use steel because the transformers are going to be pulling down. And the longer the time goes, the more downward force that big iron exerts. And unless you have steel reinforcement plates or huge fender washers, that aluminum's not going to be up to the challenge. Steel is just so much better for that purpose. And notice that Marshall went from aluminum chassis to steel chassis. No 6G2 chassis available in the EU, for example. I'm sure you could get one from Mojotone and import it. You know, $60 is what, like 50 pounds, 45 pounds, and say 15 pounds to ship it. And you probably have some VAT or something, but be worth it to have the peace of mind of having a good steel chassis for that. Daniel, I'm very glad that's the case. I like it when we have these communities. I think it's a good thing for everyone. Thank you, Red. Not Red. Sorry, thank you, Fred. I saw Fred, and I saw R, so I said Red. I see red. Thank you very much. Hey, Did Amnesia. I don't know what to tell you about someone's build of a vibroverb and why the channels are significantly different due to customizations. The best way to learn about what it truly is would be to study the original schematic and then understand that and then see where what you have differs from the schematic. And, you know, I don't know if I can tell you anything more from this distance without seeing what those changes were. Sorry. Have I seen those open source guitar pedals people are making? I'm building one based on the Daisy Seed because the prices for these things are absurd. I don't know anything about open source guitar pedals. I don't know what a Daisy Seed is. I'm sorry. I just don't keep up with the DIY pedal scene. It's ever changing and the goalposts keep getting moved. Yeah, it's Fuller's Brewery, and I knew that London Pride was a legit thing, and I tried a lot of the stuff. The only one I had that I really didn't care for was called Landlord, and it tasted strongly of grapefruit peel, very very hoppy, not fruity, but just extremely hoppy. You know, every place I went, I asked the person working the bar that I wanted a cask ale if they had it, and I wanted something that the locals loved, and I didn't want something where it was so hoppy that it was like I didn't like IPAs or things that are extremely hoppy, and I didn't like things that were fruity. And they only once was I steered wrong, and I had mostly cask ale, so I did have a few really nice lagers, and Nikki had some. She says really nice Guinness. To me, it still tasted like Guinness. I'm not a fan. I do like a dark stout, but I don't like Guinness. Yeah, Tim Taylor's Landlord. That was the one. That was the grapefruit one. Did not care for that at all. But other people do. That's fine. I had that the Tim Taylor's Landlord at the Grapes, right outside of what's that called? Why are the names gone? Leadenhall. Yeah, Leadenhall. We went there, and it was beautiful, but it was just full of investment bankers. So we went around the corner to the Grapes, and I tried a Tim Taylor's Landlord, and it was not good. But I finished it because I ordered it, and it was authentic. Now looking into getting a reactive load type thing. Well, Yosef, if you don't need the IRs, the SUR with IRs is like 600, but the SUR reactive load without IRs is like 300. And Fractal Audio also has one 300 or less that is also quite good. Those are the ones I would recommend if you don't need IRs. If you need IRs, spend a bit more. The SUR is great, and then you get up into the aux and the Fryette stuff above that. How important is using a bag on the reverb tank? Well, it gives a slight bit of vibration dampening. Mostly, it holds the cables against the tank, so the cables aren't going bing 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 on the tank, which you would hear. And the bag also keeps dirt and dust and protects the RCAs from as much humidity. So it's a good thing to have, and they're only like $20, so I highly recommend them, though they're not making a huge difference. Houston Rose says it's not Bach. I really liked the Bach that I had in other parts of Europe. Well, not other parts of Europe. The UK does not want to be a part of Europe, obviously. But yes, in my other European ventures, I've had Bach and Super Bach, very nice, and I associate Super Bach with Lisbon. So, Super Bach and peri peri sauce makes me happy. Let's see, getting through some James May references. Talk about triumphs. Let's not forget about the E-Type. Captain Fineweather says, yeah, I've been watching Dalglish, or Dalglish, whatever it is. And it's set in the 70s. He's driving a late 60s E-Type, and it's gorgeous. And I used to watch Foyle's War, and he had, not Foyle's War, sorry, that was a different show. I was watching Endeavor, which turned into Inspector Morse, and he's got that old Jag from the 50s. I shouldn't say Jag when I'm talking about that stuff. Jaguar. I'd love to have one. I spend all my time fixing it, and I already fixed enough things. Any idea when I might be caught enough to take in and work my magic on a 65 Princeton reissue? I don't know. I just got 6 amps in this past week, so email me and I'll try to fit in. I'm just always behind. I'm sorry. The Stag, Sean Connery in Diamonds Are Forever. That is the worst Connery movie, if you count the existence of Never Say Never, which I don't want to. But Diamonds Are Forever is such a bad Bond, and they just backed the truck of money up to his house, and he showed up on set and said the words, but he was not there for that, which is a shame. He was great on the first 3. The Sunbeam Alpine in Dr. No. Now, Dr. No is a great Sean Connery movie, Bond movie. Yeah, not all Sean Connery movies are great, Zardoz, but Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger are the 3 good ones, and after that he was phoning it in. He was so done by Thunderball, and then they kept doing more stuff, and it shows. But From Russia with Love is by far the best Connery Bond movie. And if you disagree with me, you're just fucking wrong. Sean is Bond. Well, I obviously have an appreciation. I do have the proper Connery RAF strap for this as well. But I also really like Daniel Craig. The writing on his movies was inconsistent, but that's compared to what it could have been compared to, say, the Moore era. The writing on the and most of the Connery era, the writing for Daniel Craig stuff has just been top notch. And I really like Timothy Dalton, but he was at a weird point, and the company couldn't figure out what they wanted the movies to be. He was fantastic. And I liked Pierce Brosnan in GoldenEye, that the movie's all over the place. And after GoldenEye, his movies, he was fine, but the movies he was surrounded by were just so bad. Yeah, I love the W8C. It's a great. It's as good as an 8-inch speaker can possibly sound. Hey, Arthur Franca. What is the lightest tube amp, or is it Francia? I'm always thrown off by the circumflexes and stuff. What is the lightest tube amp that he can gig low volume, small gigs? Do I have some suggestions? Thank you very much. Probably the lightest one would be I would say a Princeton Reverb with a Neo Creamback speaker would probably be the way to go. That's the light tube amp that you can gig low volume, small gigs with. It would be ideal. The AC-15 Custom Classic, not Custom Classic, but Custom, while I love that model, it is very heavy for its size. So I would suggest, Princeton Reverb reissue, 65 reissue with a Neo Creamback, and there you go. Let's see. And I have a very fond spot in my heart for Roger Moore. I saw The Spy Who Loved Me thousands of times when I was a kid. But while the writing was getting sillier and sillier, and he should have left after Moonraker, the writing was going downhill and his hairline was going uphill at an accelerated pace. If he had been cast instead of Lazenby when he was 5 years younger, and the writing had been better. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just a phenomenal movie, with the exception of a few unfortunate scenes and some very 1969 outfits. But if they had been able to cast more in that, Connery would not have come back, and it would have been a much better run. Nothing's wrong with Lazenby, but that's all you can say. Nothing was wrong with Lazenby. There was a really good movie, and Lazenby was in it, but is Fawlty Towers underappreciated? It can only ever be underappreciated because there's not any suitable magnitude of appreciation for that series in the world, though I try. Let's see. Lots of people love the Fender Tone Masters. Check out 5 Watt World. Well, I know Keith, and he didn't like the Tone Master until he made some pretty significant changes to it, and it's still not one of his great amps. But he was asking for a tube amp, and you won't get the sound of a tube amp with a Fender Tone Master. Yeah, I don't know Uncle Doug. I don't have any means of reaching out. I hope he's well too. I will look for Constable's Painting of an Elm Tree. Thank you, Martin. I missed that. It's probably at the Tate Britain or something. I was I admit I skipped over a lot of the Constable stuff, but I did spend an awful lot of time in their Turner gallery, which is just phenomenal. Speaking of Bond and speaking of Turner, I did look for the I can't remember the name of the painting. It's the one at the National Gallery of the ship from the Napoleonic Wars being towed off for scrap that they used in the opening, the meeting of Q with Skyfall. The fighting begins with a T. Timmery, but it was on loan to another museum when we were there, so I did not get to see it. Hey, Bobinator 5736, what's my go-to source for hard-to-find amp parts like knobs, handles, chassis hardware? not having great results, the usual suspects. Well, the two places that are usually pretty good, the Fighting Timmery. The two places that are usually pretty good are, for me, CE Distribution. For you, tubesandmore.com. Sometimes it's hard to navigate their site because of the subcategory definition can be odd. And amprepairparts.com also has a really good selection of sometimes very hard to find bits and bobs. And sadly, we have to go to eBay from time to time. I just had to go to britishfasteners.com to get a bunch of parts like these these two BA cheesehead screws for that 64 AC30. Oh, Rusty passed on. That makes me sad. What two speakers would I recommend to complement the two EVM10Ms? Oh, that's tough because EVs don't have a sound. EVs are all over the place. Some of them are very nasal and harsh, and some of them are very scooped and classic. And so I'd have to hear them, and it's tricky. Maybe Zag, because you're going to have those for that kind of thing. Maybe get some ceramics for the top. But the blend would still be good, and you could choose which characteristics you wanted to emphasize with which speaker was being mic'd, or pan them opposite. The Mojotone 10-inch Alnicos are well worth trying. I had them in that. I had a 65 Super Reverb and a 72 Super Reverb with them here the other week, and each of those had the Mojotone 10-inch Alnicos, and I thought they sounded great. And if you look at the review, the first review video of this, where Logan's playing it, the Springfield, the K-Line Springfield, that was the amp used for those, that 65 Super Reverb, and those were what those speakers were. And I thought they really sounded great. Thank you, Chris K. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Much appreciated. What's my favorite harmonic tremolo? Oh, probably the Magnatone implementation, because it's so drastic and cool, but again, it's a very expensive, finicky thing. Second would be, say, I've got a 62 concert in the other room that's going to be making its way to the channel soon. When that's done, that'll be up there. Not quite as good as the Magnatone because it's mono, but it's still quite awesome. And third would be the Vox AC30, the JMI, which is a very similar circuit to the Fender harmonic trem. But all that said, I would not build a new amp with that. I certainly wouldn't modify an amp to have that. I would use a digital modeler for that, like the Strymon Flint does that really, really well. And you can run it to different amps. You can have it in stereo. Do I have an opinion on the Vox Pathfinder 15? Well, it depends. If Vox Pathfinder 15, the user, is here, then it's fantastic because he really loves that thing. But it's not very good. It's a student amp, and it's got a little cult following, but it's not anything worth thinking about. Oh, the Sea Dweller. That's right. The Great White. I forgot about that nickname for it. Yeah, well, that was back when the Rolex was a working man's attainable watch, not just some fashion thing. This is not a Rolex. This is an homage, because I'm not going to pay $12,000 for a watch. I think it's insane. And Sea Dweller is a beefier version of the Submariner. This is my substitute Mariner. Yeah. Sea Mariner is the Sea Dweller is a heck of a thing, and you can use his brass knuckles. Hey, Brendan Gottner, is there a difference between the DSL 20CR versus the 20-watt mode on the DSL 40CR? Thanks. Yeah, the DSL 40CR has a 20-watt mode, but always works. The DSL 20CR has got real big design issues, and its bias is crazy, and it's built like shit in comparison. There's a very, people, I say, hey, the DSL 40 and DSL 40 CR are good choices within the price range. And people are like, well, what about the 20? What about the 5? I specifically did not tell anyone to get the 20 or 5 for that reason, but the 40 is quite good. And even if it didn't have a 20-watt mode, it has a master volume, which works really well. Hey, CCS, what's my go-to brand for pots and guitars? Just installed PEC RV4 type pots in our Strat. It was a major improvement. Well, I'm glad you found an improvement. I don't like using PECs in guitars because you've got to use another washer underneath it in order to make ground connections, and it's tricky. And I find it to be overkill. I use Mojotone vintage taper pots for the most part in guitars. Sometimes I'll get something else if I want to. I used to get RS Guitar Works pots, but they stopped selling them individually. You have to buy their entire wiring harness, and I'm not doing that. And for a while there, Epson was being sold through Stu Mac, and they were really great. And I think COVID killed that venture. They're not on the market now. But I also like the ability to clean a pot in a guitar. And on the PECs, you can't clean them, and they say that they're sealed and you won't need to, but in fact, they do need to be cleaned from time to time. If it was like a 335, I might use the Burns that have the sealed. The Burns sealed plastic pots really are sealed. You don't have to clean those, but they're very difficult to use in a lot of applications. But in a 335, because of the enclosed nature, that can be really nice because they're not going to get any dirt in them. But if you like the PECs, PEC makes really nice stuff. I'm glad that you like it, but I'm not sure that there'd be any sonic difference. And the taper, you can't choose a taper on those. Hey, Chris K. 68 Princeton, 65 Princeton want to swap chassis. I like the 68 look, but prefer 65. Any issues with the swap? Well, no, you can swap them around all you want. The cabinets are exactly the same. The dimensions are exactly the same. They're the same chassis. 90% of the circuit is the same. The only difference is on the 68, they go in there and they make some cuts on the board of the 65, and they populate the board wrong, and they do a bad mod, and then they put a silver panel on it, but it's exactly the same. But the 65 will sound better than the 68, unless there's something wrong with the 65. I have rarely used TAD capacitors, but I know that Brad uses them all the time, so I'm sure they're fine. They are more cost-effective in Europe and more expensive here, versus what I use is more cost-effective here, but I think more expensive in Europe. King of Tone, over or underrated? Well, it's overrated. It's overrated by the forums. It's not overrated by Analog Man. Analog Man just make it a good pedal. It takes them a long time to build them. He can only build so many, and they're kind of expensive, and they've got a big wait list. He doesn't make any claims that they're going to get you laid or paint your house or anything. But the forums take anything which is good and blow it up to this is the best, and it's a good sounding pedal. The Prince of Tone is also very good, and you can, if you do what I do, you can build your own. I think the King of Tone's a great pedal, but no pedal can ever live up to the hype that thing gets. It's a much better pedal than the Klon, which is the most overhyped, nasally okay boost ever. It's a Smith & Wesson. You've had your 6. Proving for once and for all that Scotsman can, in fact, count to 6. Let's see. I have not heard of Cabinot speakers, but $15 is not much of a Gallagher, so. Did I say Gallagher? I think I said Gallagher. Not much of a gamble. Sorry, I was starting to say gamble. And then I saw Goody Guitars talk about selling the Excalibur for $10,000. So Oops, I almost banned Sean Weatherford by mistake. I'm glad that I did not reflexively click OK. We've gotten to the point where we see a pop-up screen and we just click OK, make it go away. So you are not banned, Sean. Let's see. Yeah, I had Super Bach all over Lisbon, and I really liked it, Magisterium. I quite enjoyed it. And I quite miss being in Lisbon. Actually, I more miss being in Belém. This damn pastiche. Hey, Lucas Donald, thanks. I'm glad that's all going well for you. I'm glad I was able to play any small part in that. Any tips for optimizing the preamp as far as voltage divider values, etc.? Doc, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that. Play around with it. You won't get hurt. Just it'll sound good or it'll sound bad, and then within the range of what sounds good, find what sounds right to you that still doesn't oscillate at the highest gain. One of the tests you have to do with any of these things when you make any change from the published schematic is put all the knobs, including presence, on 10 and see if the amp begins to take off on its own, because you can make a change in a voltage divider and think it sounds awesome when you have, say, the gain at 7 and the master at 4. But if all that's dimed and the thing just takes off into high-end oscillation, then that voltage divider is either the wrong choice or you need to make another change somewhere else in the circuit. And how to do that is well beyond the scope of this chat, but that is the core concept you need to take with you. Let's see. I've had we've got the beer argument. I've had Bach and I've had Super Bach, and I like both. I will say that Super Bach tends to be enjoyed in a much warmer, sunnier day where I just feel like the world is a wonderful place to be. And sometimes Bach is enjoyed in a place where you're kind of a little bit on the shivery side and might rain at any moment. So, it doesn't change the taste so much as what you take away from them. I don't think I tried the Ghost Ship. See, I'm going to have to go back. I didn't have everything. I'll be Bach. I'll be Bach. I'll be Super Bach. But I'll have to come back at some point. And sorry about the Scotsman can count to 6, Martin. I know you can at least count to 7. Let's see. Zardoz. I'm trying to forget Zardoz, like I'm trying to forget what happened when I went over to get that pot off my bench. Well, yeah, Moonraker was not great. I love Office Space. And we're going to need you to work on Saturday. My stapler. Okay, but I'm going to burn down the whole building. Let's see. Yeah, the real thing that blows my mind is that I'm trying to remember the character name for the bad guy. Anyway, that's the same actor who played Captain Quint in Jaws, and he had a rough 10 years there to go from that to what he looked like in 1977. But I can't remember his name right now. Robert Shaw. I can't remember this character name in From Russia with Love, but phenomenal writer, playwright and poet and writer, not just a fantastic actor, as well as a fantastic drinker, sadly, which led to Jaws being the last thing he did. But yeah, phenomenal. Probably the best actor, male actor at least, to ever be in a Bond movie, though he wasn't given much to do other than be imposing in From Russia with Love. Yeah, I'm not happy about Amazon taking over Bond because they've done so well with the Lord of the Rings, and they've done so well with the Wheel of Time, and unwatchable shit. Just everything just keeps going to shit, and people are making money off of it. It's such a shame. Doesn't call, doesn't write, doesn't show up at your front door. Magisterium, yeah. I don't think it's her, man. I don't think it's her. Hey, Matt. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on those two Princetons when you get a chance to hear them. I thought they were sounding fantastic, and certainly bigger than people expect a Princeton to sound. Let me know what you think. Fargo is one of my favorite movies. Good at guitars. Absolutely. I don't think your wife has actually seen the Daniel Craig movies, if that's her impression, because my God, he was just so fantastic, even when the writing wasn't always consistent. He was the first Bond since Connery where you actually thought, yeah, this guy would just fuck me up. Just. And Connery only had that for the first 3 or 4 movies. Man, I could do an entire 3-hour stream like this on Faulty Towers. Maybe we'll do a Faulty Towers and travel thing. Could not expect On Her Majesty's Secret Service to be good because it's filmed in Portugal. What? And you're Portuguese. How can you say that? I thought the movie is one of the absolute best Bond movies. It just has some aspects that don't age well, like when the girls are all eating the food from their traditional backgrounds, and the African girls served a banana. Not so great. On the other hand, we do get the Scottish girl going, "Oh, it's true, it's true." Okay, she says he's ugly. Well, I know many women who disagree. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, I like both Casino Royale movies. I love that peak 1967. What the hell is this thing? I love that movie, but it's a very different thing. You very much have to be looking for a different thing. I've got to go because I've got a thing I've got to do in 15 minutes, and I've got to take a little break and get out of this mindset. It's a weird thing. I think Daniel Craig is fucking amazing in that, and I like the fact that he has a different look. He looks like a guy who's been in the wars, and none of us doesn't have the perfect hair or anything like that. He looks like a fucking boxer, and I think that really gives him a lot of weight to his ability to menace. Yeah. There was a comment that I wanted to end on. Oh yes. Tom's. I mentioned the war once. I think I can't do it. Basil Fawlty without being loud. I mentioned the war once. I think I got away with it. Anyway, see you guys next time. I don't know if it's going to be next week or 2 weeks from now. We will see. And I'm going to, after this ends, I'm going to make it private so I can edit out that one little bit, and then I'll repost it. So anyone wondering why they can't rewatch this, it will be back up in a little bit. Thanks, guys. I will see you guys next time.